Thanks for clicking on Wayne.com for this week's edition of Inside the Zone. He's Justin Kenny of Optimum Performance Sports. I'm Glenn Moraney here at Wayne TV, and it is week 4 already. It seems like we got here pretty quickly. And I feel like we now have a much better grip on what teams are and perhaps what teams aren't. You know, the first week can be a fluke, an anomaly. The second week maybe confirms or disconfirms. After week 3, I think we have a good sample size to figure out what's happening. And this week, we didn't have a lot of premier matchups last week. This week is about the big games.
Yes.
So let's start. We'll go over the 5 biggest games that we've got in Northeast Indiana, and that starts with a huge one at Bishop Dwenger's new stadium at Shields Field. You're talking about the Bishop Dwenger Saints 3-0 hosting Homestead 3-0. How do you see this one shaping up?
Well, it's the first big game at Shields Field, right? First premier team coming in to play the Bishop Dwenger Saints. You look at what the Saints have done, you look at what Homestead has done, and you have to be nothing but impressed with both teams have done. So Homestead in particular, that offense scoring over, 43 points per game. Luke Goody just throwing it all over the field, has a wealth of weapons. Braden Hardwick has been tremendous running the football. It's a big test for Bishop Dwenger's defense, and we'll see if they're up for the challenge.
When you take a look at these numbers, Homestead's averaging 43.0 points a game, giving up 4.0 points a game.
It's not bad, right?
Yeah. Dwenger is scoring 43.7 points a game and giving up 4.0 points a game. I mean, the numbers are practically identical. And you and I were talking earlier in the season that we didn't know if Dwenger's offense was going to be explosive to put up the type of points that we knew that they perhaps had the talent to. They have, and they've gotten off, and they've gotten that confidence, and they've gotten in that rhythm. They look like a team that is capable of putting up 30-plus points a night in the SAC.
That's huge. They won a state championship last year with most of the year not being like that, really having to rely on a running game and a defense to really lead the way. This year, there's no such limitations with that passing game with Brendan Lytle has been tremendous. I think both teams have lacked that challenge on the schedule. So while they're both legit 3-0, I don't think they're a battle-tested 3-0. So I think we find out more about both teams coming up on Friday.
When you take a look at what Homestead has been able to do, Braden Hardwick's got over 400 yards. He's got 7 touchdowns. They've got 3 receivers in double digits with receptions, starting with Griffin Little. How can they create some problems? Because Jared Kistler is a big receiver. Griffin Little is a huge guy. They have size of the receiver position, not only speed, but then you have to guard Camden Rogers. You've got to guard Jake Archbold, who's had a great year. How does Dwenger go about kind of stopping those offensive weapons?
Well, I think Homestead can challenge Dwenger downfield if they give Luke Goody time. He can scramble a little bit out of the pocket, but he's not a runner by any means. So I think if you want to attack Dwenger over the top, you have to give Luke Goody the time to do that. And so the onus is going to be on that offensive front, not just to open up holes against a physical Bishop Dwenger defensive line for Braden Hardwick, but also protect the quarterback and give him time to really kind of surgically place some balls downfield.
Conversely, Homestead's defensive line, they've had some good performances. I know Matt Miller's got 4 sacks already, but when you take a look at, they haven't faced anybody like Dwenger's offensive line, not only in terms of talent, but also just in terms of sheer size. What's the key to winning that battle in the trenches, and how key is that to Homestead slowing down what Dwenger's been able to do?
Well, I think it's bottling up the running game. I think you have to find a way to really slow down Devin Tipman and Louis Tipman and a whole cast of others.
Everybody Tipman.
Basically, fill in the blank Tipman. So make Bishop Dwenger as one-dimensional as possible. Is that possible? We'll see. Dwenger has the ability to beat them through the pass, but I think if you take that run game away, put the onus on Brendan Lytle, and then you can kind of play the pass a little bit. They need a push up front, I think, as well. So a lot of things that defense needs to do. We're very impressed with what Homestead's defense has done, but Friday night is by far the biggest test it's had all season long.
And really, the other matchups in the SAC, aside from some South Side at Snyder, are pretty equal. You got Concordia at Lewis, North Side at Wayne, and then Northrop at Carroll. Northrop, they're 2-1 right now.
How about that?
And if you recall, they won this game last year for the first time in a long time. So I know they're feeling pretty confident as they head in to Dean Gorsuch Field on Friday night. In the Northeast State, this is one of the matchups we circled at the beginning of the season. East Noble traveling to DeKalb. Neither team has disappointed. They both come in 3-0. DeKalb coming off a 29-14 win at New Haven last week, and East Noble getting it done against Huntington North. And as we talked last week, they had one of the best non-conferences of any team in Northeast Indiana, regardless of conference. How do you see this one playing out in Friday night up in Waterloo.
Well, how about DeKalb last Friday night? I thought that was a little bit of a trap game, 2-0. You're facing a team like New Haven back up against the wall at 0-2. They fall down early. They fight back and score, 27 some points in a row. So really showed some moxie on the road at New Haven last week on the turf. Now, you get East Noble at home this week, a lot of momentum, a lot of excitement with DeKalb, and you have to find a way to slow down Bailey Parker. And I think Huntington North was able to do some things to really slow him down, but maybe it was just a blip on the radar for Mr. Parker.
When you look at DeKalb, the one thing that strikes me is we talked a lot about Evan Eschbach. The guy threw for 2,000 yards last year at Wawasee. He's no stranger to these kids at DeKalb growing up in that area. But he goes 2 for 9 passing last week. And Coach and Evan talked about it after the game with us on Friday night. They did not throw the football very well on Friday. But Landon Miller rushed for 203 yards and 3 touchdowns. They have a lot of versatility. They aren't necessarily, they don't have to ground and pound you, but they can. And we know that 2 out of 9 is going to be more the aberration than it is the rule when it comes to the passing game. How does that play into what East Noble has to do defensively? Because they have to guard really both sides, I think, or both options when it comes to offense.
Yeah, definitely. It's DeKalb's really multifaceted in terms of that offense. It's got that gargantuan offensive front that's able to open holes and really maul defensive lines. We'll see how East Noble holds up with that. But I still think the pressure is on DeKalb to beat a marquee team in the Northeast 8. I think that this year that's East Noble and Leo. So a huge game. They get it at home. They can make some plays early, get some momentum. I think they're in good shape. But I think once what we saw last week with Leo and East Noble is that maybe the margin between those two teams and DeKalb and Columbia City maybe isn't as large as we thought it was.
Well, the margin certainly wasn't large between Leo and Norwell. My goodness, 3-2. Are you kidding me?
Couldn't hold it.
But I mean, I love that kind of game because we're used to, game of the weeks a lot of times are just shootouts, whoever gets the ball last. And 3-2, man, you can't get a lower scoring game where both teams score and one team wins than a game like that. I mean, literally.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's good it was your game of the week because you used to hopefully get into a game, getting a couple highlights, and head into the next game, and you wouldn't be able to get next to anything in that game.
No, it was magical though. Like the best play was an interception in return for a touchdown that got called back. But but you know what? You love to have some of those just because it makes it interesting on Friday nights. If you're East Noble, what are you most concerned about, and what is really the focus heading into this game? Because that win against Plymouth in Week 1. It looks a little more sexy even now because Plymouth took care of Warsaw at Warsaw. Last week, Warsaw was in the top 15 in 6A. So that win, the Mishawaka win, and now they ground out a win against Huntington North. What is East Noble doing well? What do they have to do well again on Friday?
Well, it starts with Bailey Parker and just how balanced he is offensively, but he's got a cast of characters around him that have really been contributing big time. Van Gorder in the backfield that has been tremendous to replace Caden Harshberger. An offensive front, too, that's been able to protect Bailey Parker and allow him to do some things. It's a well-rounded team, sluggish last week, but I think that's the perfect teaching tool for Luke Amstutz. Hey, we took care of 2 really good teams week 1 and 2. Maybe we went through the motions a little bit week 3. Now we have to refocus and get ready for a big road test at DeKalb.
All right, so the rest of the Northeast 8 looks like this: Columbia City at Huntington North, New Haven at Leo, Belmont at Norwell. Which one of those games really stands out to you? I kind of want to see of City at Huntington North.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think what Coach Prescott's doing at Huntington North, we felt maybe would need a little bit of time, and he's still going to need time to really turn that program completely around. But what they did last week and hanging around with East Noble, they're making some early season strides. We'll see if Columbia City can continue that good play as it heads into the back half of its schedule. That's absolutely loaded. Let's
talk about the ACAC now. You got Bluffton at Woodland as a premier game this week. Woodland kind of got off the schneid, although their schedule certainly didn't do them any help.
Right.
They won last week 20-6 against Heritage, and then Bluffton. We thought they'd play South Adams a little closer than 41-0. At least I don't know. I think most people did.
I think so.
Thought it would be a ball game. How does Bluffton respond to that, knowing that Woodland for a long time has been one of the top dogs in this conference, and even though Woodland's only 1-2, defeating a team like Woodland at their place would mean a lot to a program like Bluffton who's looking to build.
We'll see how that junior class of Bluffton bounces back because they were thoroughly abused last week against South Adams. You look at Woodland. Do they have Ben Reedy at quarterback? He left the game last week with an injury, so what's that position look like going into Friday night? And that's really the catalyst for their team is that quarterback position because they have so many weapons on the perimeter that they can get the ball to. So how does that change some things if Reedy is out? And then offensively, I think for Bluffton, I think if they can get that running game going, if they can continue to grind out yards, which they weren't able to do last week, made them one-dimensional, and really that's not their style.
Adams Central is at Jay County this week. I don't want to preview that game because I think the math
is not
is not going to be kind
How
to Jay
about Southern
County.
Wells last week, knocking off Jay County?
I like it. It was a comeback win.
Yeah, we thought South Adams would be that team that was going to go over. Now it kind of all of a sudden looks like Jay County is going to be that team.
When you take a look about Adams Central, the win against Monroe Central, how can they carry that as momentum, or what did that say about the team? Because, again, they graduated so many seniors last year, guys that had won a lot of football. These guys hadn't played a lot of varsity football on Friday nights, at least not in the key positions, and they welcome in the fifth-ranked team in the state and pull it out. I mean, does that tell us we were I don't want to say wrong, because we're never wrong.
No.
Just ask us.
We'll just spin it
to
make it sound like we're right.
But maybe Coach Mosier has figured out a way to plug in guys, and the system machine just continues to roll and crank out players.
Here's the thing. When you talk to Coach Mosier in preseason and he said, our goal is to finish in the top 3 of the conference, you're like, okay, then naturally you think that they're going to regress significantly. Mm-hmm. But that's Michael Mosier just spinning things and challenging his team, because they look like probably the second best team in the conference right now behind South Adams. So it's this group of players, a lot of them sophomores, some juniors, a couple seniors that have stepped up and really risen to the occasion. And you look at Adams Central long term, not that big of a senior class. A lot of these kids contributing and beating teams like Monroe Central are sophomores and juniors. So Michael Mosier even pleasantly surprised, I think, at 3-0.
I just think that's a huge win for them, confidence-wise, to bring in a team that's ranked in the top 10 in the state. And, you know, all those polls are based on what they did last season. Yeah. So I think a lot of people had Monroe Central perhaps favored in that one. So
yeah, I think
good
so
on
too.
Adams Central to pull that one out. In the NECC, we've got 2 matchups this week that could determine both the big division title and the small division title. We'll start with the big guys first. Surprisingly, Angola 0-3.
Yep.
They'll be at West Noble, who is 3-0. How do you see this one playing out, given the fact that Angola's confidence has to be a little bit down, and West Noble's confidence has to be a little bit up?
I think it's, West Noble needs to come into this game and kind of look back at the last couple of years and what Angola's done to them. And they've been close here and there, but this is a time with Brandon Pruitt and Josh Gross and Kyle Mahler at quarterback. This was a group that last week we were saying is going to bust out at some point. They were able to last Friday. And Angola, this brutal schedule for such a inexperienced group is really taking its toll. And so I think West Noble is in a position to win this game and really lock up the NECC big school division, I think, early on.
It's crazy for Angola because you look at their schedule and you say out of the 9 games in the regular season, their first 4 games are the toughest.
Right.
And they're back-to-back-to-back-to-back. How do they get off the schneid? What can they do? I mean, I think the natural thing for a teenage kid to do is when you're 0-3, put your head down.
Sure.
Especially, I don't know how good the team from Michigan was last week. Obviously, they're pretty good.
Yeah.
They beat them 40-3 in Angola. But how do you bounce back from that and say, wipe the slate clean? And if you're Andy Thomas, say, hey, man, if we want to accomplish one of our goals, which is winning a conference championship, really all that other stuff goes out the window. It starts this week.
Yeah, and I think that's the message for Andy Thomas is this: we're 0-0 in the conference. It starts this Friday, and we'll find out about the resiliency of this group. If, win or lose on Friday, you have to think they show some fight, and if they don't, then that's a bigger problem for Angola, obviously. But that's the mindset in terms of Andy Thomas, I have to think, is getting these kids to move on, put the first 3 weeks out of their minds, focus on West Noble. It's a conference foe, division foe. Start fresh and try to get a win on the road.
All right. Now, the small school division looks like it could come down between these 2 teams. Eastside at Busco. We've seen Busco just run over people thus far, including a 40-22 win against Garrett last week. Eastside's 1-2, but they've played a pretty decent schedule, including West Noble last week.
Yep.
What are going to be the keys in this? I imagine it's at Eastside you have to make Churubusco a passing team, something no one has been able to do yet.
It sounds simple enough, right? But nobody's been able to do it. It's slow down Jake Falk and Gage Kelly. That's what it comes down to at Churubusco. Because we don't know yet if they can win a game when those 2 guys are shut down. Can they go vertical and win a football game? We don't know because they haven't had to do that yet. So I don't know if anybody can do that on their schedule the rest of the way. Do we get into the 1A playoffs before we find somebody to do that? Maybe nobody can. Who knows? But it sounds simple enough. But Paul Sade says we're not doing anything special. We're just going to run our offense, and we're going to give it to these two guys, and you have to stop them. And through the first 3 weeks, nobody's been able to do it.
What can Eastside do? Because, again, they beat Heritage in week 1 pretty handily, but they've got a new guy at the quarterback position in Laban Davis. They've got Firestein at the running back position. They've got new guys breaking in. This is going to be their biggest challenge, I think, of the year in terms of a game that truly counts for them.
Well, I think offensively, they just need to play keep away. They need to put together some long drives or scoring drives at the very least. Just get some points on the board and make Churubusco really meet them score for score. And I think obviously they need to slow down Falk and Kelly, but I think offensively they make some plays. Look, Garrett had some plays last week in the first half that could have went for touchdowns or big yardage, either a drop or a penalty or something like that. And before you knew it, it was 24-0 Churubusco. Eastside needs to stay within striking distance and make some plays and then see what happens down the road. But again, it comes down to Falk and Kelly and slowing those guys down.
Overall, what are you most looking forward to about week 4? Because we are now in the meat of the conference season. And as we've been talking about, conference championship type games, for the first time, I really think across the board, are happening this week.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I'm looking at Dwenger and Homestead because so many people have put Dwenger, Homestead, Snyder in the same conversation preseason and through the first 3 weeks of the regular season. None of those teams have played each other yet. None of them have really been challenged. So this is the first real marquee game, in my opinion, in the SAC to what will decide who gets the victory bell.
All right, and we'll have it all covered for you on the Highlight Zone Friday night. And, of course, we'll be back here Monday talking about it on Inside the Zone. For Justin, I'm Glenn. We'll see you next Monday.